Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and everything is going okay. Let me know in Q&A if you have any questions. So today I will be talking about how to deal with adult ADHD through humor. And you can see here my Medium handle. Hello to everyone again. So what is ADHD? ADHD is it stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And it has been trending on social media now for a while because what many people relate to is this feeling of constant need to feel stimulated and excited. And in fact, if I could describe ADHD in one sentence, like I did in my Medium article, you can see here, is that ADHD is like chasing a life where everything is exciting and nothing is boring. And as you can imagine, this can turn very tiring very often. So how has this impacted my life, or what are some of the signs, positive or negative, that that have impacted my life when it comes to ADHD? Well, if you go to my website, you can see that I am a linguist. I did my PhD in linguistics. I traveled and did fieldwork in Vanuatu, in the other side of the world. And quickly after that, I also decided to work on memes and comics in my academic research. And so I really get stimulated by many different things, and I constantly change topics on what I'm doing. And that is what excites me. So at the same time, I also draw comics and especially recently comics about ADHD. So these are some of the, let's say, positive aspects of having a lot to do and being motivated by many different things. And this is what transpired in my life when it comes to ADHD. But sort of the flip side of that, and having many different interests and constantly being drawn away from boring things, if you will, is that what happens with ADHD is that we often also have big emotions. So the fact that we have this need to get stimulated all the time, we often don't know how to react if things are not stimulating, or we react in negative ways. And we often also feel extreme, either positive or negative emotions because of this need for stimulation. So sometimes we will fall madly in love and be crazy about different things or people and so on, because this stimulates and makes us motivated. Another, let's say, bad aspect of ADHD is that we often perceive the things that we perceive as boring, we often don't even do. So, for instance, bureaucracy is one of my worst nightmares. Before I even come to the end of the process, I have lost all the motivation to do it, because there's just so many different steps and so many different boring things to do on the way. And another thing that also sometimes impacts my work is that I get lost in all the drafts. All the creative ideas are very fun because they're new and they're exciting, but then they also should get finished, and sometimes that is not the most exciting part of the job. So this is one of the problems that I will be addressing today: how to get closer to finishing these important things. So here we have this issue. I have to do a boring task, and many of us have faced this in our lives, right? It's not just bureaucracy, but also oftentimes parts of our job could be perceived as boring, or sometimes things that maybe we even haven't given a chance to find what could be interesting about it, but we think it's boring. And so there is a task we have to do. What usually happens, not just with people with ADHD, but especially with people with ADHD, we procrastinate and we don't do it. In turn, this leads to feeling bad about ourselves, because of this feeling of guilt and shame, and thinking we're just not capable of living the life as it should be lived. We're not capable to do our jobs. We get lost in this train of thoughts. And then what that leads to is only more procrastination. So we actually don't achieve anything by feeling bad about it. And it's very hard to get out of this cycle because simply there's nothing to motivate us or to take us out of it. But I have found one thing that at least it has worked for me, and I hope it might work for you as well, and that is to use humor to break the cycle. So humor sort of works almost as a spell. If you have at any point seen Harry Potter, there's a spell called Ridiculous. And this spell simply takes away the power of your fear. And once you throw it, the thing you're afraid of becomes almost a mockery. And so suddenly this is now something to laugh at and not to be afraid of. So in a way, making fun of our struggle takes the power away from the fear and the guilt and the shame associated with the struggle and breaks the cycle of procrastination. And besides humor, which is, like I said, a very powerful tool for taking away all these negative emotions and turning it into positive emotions. So besides this amazing humor spell, we also have creativity. And creativity is also an amazing tool which has another, it works in a different way. And the way it works is that it makes you feel productive because even though you haven't actually done the task, you were creative with the comic. You did create something, and we will get to that. So you were creative in making this joke, and that makes you feel more productive. So what is this exactly, and how did I implement this in my life? This is a method I call comic journaling. And in comic journaling, as you can see in some of my articles on Medium, I basically make short comic strips where I use, as I said, humor and creativity and make fun of a specific struggle that I'm going through. And usually this is, of course, inspired in my real life. And with these short comics, I document what I'm going through, and miraculously, I somehow get to the other side and beat procrastination most of the time. So how does this work? Here's an example of a comic I did in one of my articles. So I was so frustrated before I did this comic because I was scrolling on my phone and I wanted to prepare some dinner for myself. I was hungry, but I couldn't get away from the phone. And I just couldn't get the motivation to prepare this dinner. So what I did instead is I sat down and wrote this comic about this particular experience. And after doing this comic, so saying, okay, it takes me 1 hour to even get to do it. I know it will only take me 15 minutes to cook it, and then I will probably take 3 hours to recover. After this, I actually went and made the dinner. And I realized then what the power of this comic is that I made fun of this experience, and suddenly that gave me the ability to do the task I had to do. So I thought there's something to this method that is pretty powerful. And how does this work, really? Well, I think what happens here is that this spell of creativity, humor through comic journaling really takes away this feeling of shame. Like I said, humor shows you that there might be a positive feeling associated with your struggle, and then you start feeling good about it. You also start feeling good about yourself because you created a comic. You're productive, even if it's in the sense of at least I can make a comic, at least I can post it on social media. And then that leads in turn to good mood, and this good mood leads to, well, maybe I can do the task. Maybe it's not so bad. And now we broke the cycle and we reversed it to the positive side. And so let's see how this happens. How can we actually apply this? How can we make comics? How easy are they to make? Well, I will show you what is the core of a joke for a comic like this. The core of this joke is a contradiction. So we should find contradictions in our life that can then lead to humor. So first of all, we have this contradiction between the wasted time. As you can see in this comic I've just shown, we have 4 hours of wasted time, the preparation, the recovery time, but the productive time is only 15 minutes. And that's kind of ridiculous. Why does ADHD lead to this kind of behavior? And so this is a contradiction, right? I need to prepare dinner. I don't feel like it. Instead, I spent 4 hours not doing it. And so we take a contradiction like that, whatever it is, And feel free to now join me in this and think about contradictions in your life, something that you're struggling with, whatever it is. You can just write it down and share it in the Q&A if you have something like that. Let me just check if everything is going okay. Yeah, so just feel free to let me know whatever you are going through, whatever you're struggling with, or if you have any suggestions on some other creative methods that can address these kinds of struggles. Okay, so here I have an example for a contradiction that we can make a comic out of. This example is, and it's very topical, now we're at a conference, I am attending talks at a conference, but I'm struggling to pay attention to what is being said. So what is happening here is that we have a very basic contradiction. It's not a joke yet, but it is something that as an ADHD person, I think many of you would relate to this. You want to attend the conference, you actually want to pay attention, but it can be hard to do so. Okay, then how can we make this into a joke? Well, we should make it funnier. Just because we made a statement, it's not yet a joke, right? So the way to make it funnier, I found, is to make the statement more implicit. And by this, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm attending talks at a conference. I'm going to change it to have fewer words and to be a bit more punchliney. So to be a bit more implicit, I will say something like, I write a title or a label, ADHDer at a conference, because the rest we will draw, right? So it will be clear from the visuals as well. And then I'm struggling to pay attention to what is being said. I can say something like, I can recreate the environment in which this is happening. So I can make a speech bubble in which the person speaking says, "Thank you for your attention." And then the ADHDer reacts with a worried face. And this is something that I have to admit is also based on my personal experience. And when this happened in real life, I was like, oh yeah, thank you for your attention. Not sure if I paid attention, but I am being thanked for it. So of course, sometimes the joke just shows in real life to you. Okay, so let's see now the third part, draw it. How do we draw it? So some of you might be following this, some of you might be jotting some stuff down, or maybe even drawing something. So feel free also to follow some of the sketches I will show now, just to sort of inspire you on how you could simply draw comics. And I always follow the principle that I keep my comics about ADHD very simple, because that actually allows me to finish them. As a person with ADHD, I often don't have the patience to really draw everything out in a perfect way. So the simpler it is, the easier to come to the finish line. And also, it's easier to be relatable and to focus on what really matters. And what really matters are emotional or facial expressions in a comic. And you will see now why. So that's why we're going to focus on heads, because head is where we express emotions. And this is something that will communicate what the ADHD character is going through. So we can draw a very simple oval or a circle or whatever shape of the head you want. And then I like to start with the hair. And I think this is something that can sort of make your character iconic. You decide what kind of hair they have, short, long, wavy, and so on. And again, it should be something that can be done in a few lines, very simply. Then we put the eyes, eyebrows, nose, a mouth. Again, we just use lines and dots and whatever you feel like using. And when it comes to emotion, what we really have to pay attention to is how we draw the eyebrows. So in relation to the eyes, what position they're in, and the mouth. And as you can see, when we want to draw a character who is sad compared to happy, happy has elevated eyebrows and sad has eyebrows that go down, and the mouth is more curvy to mimic this sort of shape of the mouth. And the same thing if you want to do other emotions. It's just different combinations of where the eyebrows go, the shapes of the eyebrows and the mouth. We can also do something slightly cuter. We can change the eyes to be bigger and add some shine, add some white shine, maybe add a small wrinkle to the mouth. And this way we can manipulate sort of the level of cuteness of our character. We can also choose that the eyes to be this sort of manga or emoji eyes when we are really happy, as well as a bigger mouth. And also we can combine emotions into something in between. So here we have a character that is feeling a little bit uneasy. So the eyebrows are elevated. It should be happy according to the eyes and eyebrows, but the mouth is showing some kind of restraint. And so the sweat drop is there to show that we're feeling a bit anxious about something. So we can always combine different emotions, and then we get even more complexity. And of course, you can always read comics and get even more inspired in what to draw. Okay, so back to our comic, our example. We have an ADHDer at a conference. We have thank you for your attention in a speech bubble, and then our ADHDer is supposed to react with a worried face. So here now, before we draw it, we can think a little bit about the setup. Do we want some other people to be there? What is the environment of this comic? And most importantly, what kind of facial expression are we going to show here? What does worried mean in this context? And what I yes, I had this here, setting and facial expression. And what I decided on is to actually not draw other people in the setting, because that would sort of take away from this punchline of the joke, which is really, thank you for attention is the most important part, and then the ADHDer's face is the second most important part, or the punchline of the joke, while the setting, the facial expression, while the setting should be more implicit and sort of just understood from the context of thank you for your attention. So what I decided is not to draw other people or even the room where this is happening. I just decided to represent other people by clapping, and by showing that with an onomatopoeic clap, clap, clap writing. And so this is the final product. We have thank you for attention, clap, 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 and the ADHDer is not sure if this applies to them. And this is also my final slide. And thank you for your attention, or the lack of it. If you struggled at some points to keep your attention, that's perfectly fine. Because now we're also going to get to you and see what is what are your opinions on this? Do you have any interesting situations that we can represent in a comic, that we can make a joke out of? Do you want to share them in the Q&A perhaps? Or if you have questions about how to make comics, or questions about ADHD, if you want to share your experience, I am open to any kinds of questions you might have. So I invite you to join the Q&A. Okay, so I'm finally reading through Q&A. Sorry, it was a bit slow to get to the questions. Okay, Naz asks, how do you come up with a text when it's just emotions? That's a good question. I would say that, so you have to give something, right? You have to have a story that goes with the emotion. And in this case, like, I would say that, of course, if it's just raw emotion and you're unsure why you're feeling it, then you really maybe don't have exactly a comic material there. But you can imagine maybe what caused it. You can actually, having to do a comic might be a good way to force you to think about what prompted that emotion. And so you can relate it to an event that maybe made you angry or made you sad. So I would say that this method can also work in that way, to make you think about why you're feeling a certain way. And even if maybe you're not completely sure why you feel something, if you invent it for a comic, it can be a way of discovering whether that is true or not. So I hope I answered your question, but definitely this kind of method is very malleable, and you can use it for very different means or different purposes. Okay. Some people couldn't stay longer. Yeah, indefinitely this will be available also as a recording, and I will probably write it up as a Medium article, so you will be able to read it that way. Oh, Agustin has a contradiction. Submitting paperwork to get divorced, but thinking about the loss shared and not doing it. Yeah, well, that could be a comic, for instance. I guess, yeah, we could think about a way to make it a bit funnier. Or maybe, yeah, this one is also a bit sort of more serious than the ones I suggested. So sometimes, in some cases, we might think whether it is appropriate to do it in that particular way, or if it's appropriate to make an actual joke out of it. Or in some cases, when some things are more traumatic, or really are related to maybe some kind of trauma that I would say we don't find funny at all. In that case, I would say we can also simply document our journey and make drawings or any kind of creative outlet that is expressing those emotions. This also ties to the first question. If we're just feeling an emotion, we can try to represent it, whether in an abstract or a more concrete way. In some cases, I even went as far as creating characters, a bit like in Inside Out. I would create a character for an emotion that I'm feeling. For instance, we have sadness, and then we have joy, and they're interacting, where they're saying, oh, why are you feeling sad now? And so in a way, this trying to play out what might be happening in my brain as different characters in a story. And sometimes when you have to create these characters and you are asking yourself, why are you feeling this way? What if I told you that you have reasons to be cheerful or happy? It is almost like cognitive behavioral therapy in a way that that is also creative, because now you're talking to yourself through these characters, and you're expressing yourself in that way. And I think the fact that you draw it, even if it's just blobs and shapes and things, stickmen, I think somehow representing it visually can be useful, because you are giving some substance to your thoughts. They don't seem like an integral part of your personality necessarily, but once they're on paper, it's almost more they're outside of your head, if that makes sense. So you don't see them as this menacing integral part of your personality that cannot be defeated, but it becomes this character in a story, and this is a way of detaching yourself from that thought. And this is what often we try to do in therapy, is to understand that our thoughts are not necessarily true, or even if they are not objectively true necessarily, and they are not necessarily us. They're just thoughts that might have come about as a result of trauma or some other circumstance that happened in our life, or out of conditions like ADHD or so on. And it doesn't mean necessarily they're bad thoughts, but they can be. And I think making them into characters can show us that, because now we have them as these like other entities. So we don't identify to the same extent with them. So yeah, I think I went more deeply into what actually makes comic journaling so powerful, at least for me. And I think for many people who are very visual, this is also very important, because some people might actually prefer other forms of art, and they might prefer to do a similar task but with another form of art, maybe something 3D, maybe something auditive or musical. In my case, comics and visual representation are really something I really need in my life. Every time I even studied for a test, I used to draw short comics as a way of summarizing, let's say, history lessons or so on. So I think there is an exploration to be made, what creative outlet is the most appropriate, and what really can do this kind of can achieve this of taking you out of your head and showing you what these things are, maybe making a joke about it, sometimes maybe not. Even though humor, of course, is a very powerful tool, but it's not always appropriate. Sometimes we need to seriously talk about it and maybe just let ourselves be creative and kind of sit with those thoughts. Okay, so I think I spoke enough about that aspect. There's one last question by Carol. I try to multitask doing it now, but multitasking doesn't really work. How do you deal with that? Yes, I also have the issue that I try to multitask, but I think I realized I can't really do it. And I think now I embraced a little, well, that's the thing. Did I embrace it? I think I still try sometimes, like you said. I try to multitask, but it doesn't really work out. I think I came to a point where I do try to tell myself, no, it doesn't work. So focus on one thing. And I try to make my schedule in a way that I do have longer chunks of a day where I just do one thing. And I know it's not always possible, but I think for many people with ADHD, that can also be a good thing, because then if hyperfocus is ever a good thing, it can lead to hyperfocus and actual productivity. And I know that I'm maybe being too, I shouldn't wish to hyperfocus, but I often do, because those are the times when I actually am productive. So sometimes inviting hyperfocus by saying, okay, I'll take the weekend just to draw comics. That is often when I will finish all the comics that I wanted to do. Or that's when I will write a research paper, when I actually have several hours blocked out just for that. And I'm also not good with schedules. So this kind of thing, the best for me, the best non-scheduling, or the best, in a way, let's say ADHD-friendly scheduling, is to say, I have several days where I don't have anything special scheduled, or maybe just a few meetings or something, but not like it's completely free. And then I just do whatever I feel like doing at that time. And then I focus on that intensely. That's how it works for me. But multitasking and jumping from one thing to another doesn't work. And that's also why, let's say, the traditional scheduling doesn't work for me, because saying I will work this much, I will work for 1 hour on something, then I get into it. And then coming to the next thing, then I can't get into the next thing, because or I can't even start doing the thing that I will just do for 1 hour. That feels, then I get into the ADHD paralysis, which is when you sort of, you don't want to start a task because you are, you know that you don't have enough time to get into the mood, to get obsessed with it, which is like, let's say, the ADHD strength, the curse and the blessing. But yeah, that will be about multitasking. I will just check if I did all the questions. And yes, I think I did. Oh no, there's more questions, sorry. I guess my thing didn't refresh, okay. How do I know if I have ADHD? Wow, okay, some people are thanking me for this, thank you. So how to know? There's another question about that. How to know if you suffer from ADHD? Well, I got an official diagnosis because I went to a psychiatrist. There's a lot of books, there's the DSM-5. So this is a book of psychology that is followed by practitioners in psychology and psychotherapy, where they have a list of symptoms. In the end, that's what we have. We have a list of symptoms, and to know whether you have it, you really have to go to a therapist or a psychiatrist, most likely, who will then examine different areas of your life and tell you whether it is a clinical diagnosis. But I would say, even before you get a clinical diagnosis, you can really get a lot out of different kinds of practices or methods like the one I presented, and try to help yourself before you can get an appointment, or make sure that you also have a clinical treatment if it is a clinical diagnosis. How did you finish a PhD with ADHD? I'm impressed. Well, I was obsessed about this topic. I was obsessed about languages and linguistics. Now I'm not anymore. So now I'm working on comics, and I'm obsessed about comics. So I think it's an obsession thing. It just happened to be, just happened to be motivated for that long. That is maybe impressive, I guess, for like 3 years. Do people ever accuse you of trivializing ADHD by using humor and cartoons? Well, not yet. I also don't have such a large following that this would actually be a problem. But I think we're over now. Yeah, so I think this is it. I will maybe still answer this question if that's okay. Yeah, so basically, I think that this issue with, well, issue, or some people have been complaining about social media and ADHD and how maybe people will take anything to be an ADHD symptom and so on. I think this is just it's not a problem. I think it's not a problem because, of course, even people who don't have a clinical ADHD, they will still maybe relate to that struggle. Maybe showing it on social media is going to be useful for more people just than those with ADHD, right? And then on the other hand, people who actually do have ADHD will find it helpful, and maybe they will seek out a diagnosis. If they happen to have a diagnosis, great. So I think talking about these things in whatever way helps us get better, whatever the cause of that, whether it's ADHD or not, I think is always a good thing. So yeah, I don't think it will be a problem, or it shouldn't be, at least. Okay, I will also copy all these questions, and maybe I will address them in my next Medium article. I will try to sum up everything that I spoke about in my talk. And so if I haven't answered your question, I will try to answer it there if that's okay with you. So thank you all for coming. I'm really impressed with the number of people. I was a bit confused in the beginning about the technicalities, so I hope that didn't ruin anything. Thank you so much for coming, and I will be talking to you on Medium. Thank you so much. Goodbye.